All right. Thank you for joining us today in this wonderful event curated by Writers QI. My name is Oliver, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Director of CCIR Academy, and we're an educational enterprise based in Cambridge, UK. Now, over at CCIR Academy, we provide a variety of online educational experiences where students get to work directly with industry experts and leading academics from the University of Cambridge and the University of Oxford. We place a big emphasis on ensuring that the knowledge that our students learn in our programs is ultimately useful and applicable in their lives and in their careers. And in a way, that's what today's talk is about. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you your speaker, Chris Ju. Chris is an incoming software engineer at Amazon who is currently completing her degree in computer science at the University of Pennsylvania. Additionally, Chris is also what we call an industry advisor for one of CCR's upcoming programs, the Cambridge Startup Tech Camp, where she has worked to help us at CCIR design a coding bootcamp for high school students that aims to cultivate the practical skills necessary for a future career in tech. So in what follows, Chris will be sharing her insights on how you can build your personal and educational profile to optimize your chances of getting into a top tech company like Amazon. And towards this end, she'll talk a little bit about CCR's Tech Camp, but mostly she'll be focusing on the kinds of extracurriculars and the kinds of education that you need to pursue in order to propel yourself into a career in tech. Chris, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here. So first, let me share my presentation. We'll begin shortly. Everyone can see my screen, right? All good. Cool. So welcome, everyone. Today, I'm going to share some tips and advice on how to get into the tech industry. And as a student, of course, the best way to get your foot in the door is through internships. But before we think about how to get into tech, let's first think about why. As a programmer, what you will be doing every day at work will, of course, be coding. So what is coding all about, and is it the right path for you? So coding at its core is really all about logic. You're using logic as a building block to create programs and build larger software systems. So if you really like the logical way of thinking, or you really enjoy the clarity of laying everything out, then you might really enjoy coding. In a way, it's a lot like Lego, where you have these basic building blocks, which you can combine and design in any way you want. So out of these Lego pieces, you could arrive at a castle, if you so wish, or equally well, you can build a truck. So I think there is a close analogy between this Lego building and coding. So apart from the traditional tech companies, coding is actually very versatile. So it's heavily used in other sectors as well, like finance, game development, animation studios. All of these places use coding heavily. And also, coding is widely used in research. A lot of times it's very interdisciplinary, and just some examples that I can think of are linguistics, psychology, neuroscience, and cognitive science, just to name a few. So all of these disciplines use coding in their research a lot to gather data and then analyze data to derive insights. So coding is really versatile. Now let's see some real-world examples for what you can build with code. So if you grow your coding skills, one example is you could totally build a game, and you can bring whatever is in your imagination into reality. Another example is this guy built a hair cutting robot with just code on his computer and some tools in the garage. So that could come in really handy during the quarantine times. Also, if you really get good at coding and you gather a bunch of people, if you guys know what you're doing, you can totally propel a rocket into space. And SpaceX is doing exactly that. So on a more down-to-earth note, if you are good at coding, you can totally build an online shopping platform, which all of us use every day, and we kind of can't live without it nowadays. And to expand on that, there's actually an entire economy of sharing that has blossomed because of these technological platforms like Airbnb, Uber, and Lyft. So code has a lot of implication for our real lives, and it has the power of bringing a lot of people around the globe together and allowing them to share resources in a more efficient way. So now that we've talked about the power and versatility of coding, let's think about what are the resources for learning it. So the first thing that comes to our mind is of course computer science courses that are offered at your school or at your university. So these are definitely good entry points for start learning to code. But along the way, you will realize that YouTube is actually also an amazing resource where a lot of tutorials are helpful either to clarify concepts that you are confused about in class or simply learn more about extra stuff to do in your project. So the YouTube coding tutorials has been very helpful for me along the way, and I'm sure I will be watching a lot of these tutorials after I go into work. So in my opinion, coding is the most self-teachable discipline nowadays, simply because of the amount of information and tutorial available online. A lot of these are very high quality, so I highly recommend any of you who are interested in coding to check out these resources. But of course, especially for beginners, a lot of the times we need more guidance and structure to our learning. And in that case, I think the best way for you to get good at coding in a short period of time is through immersive coding camps. So personally, I started coding when I took a summer class at Cornell, and that is a very intensive, I took classes every day, and during that time, I feel like I start from someone who doesn't know anything about coding to starting to love coding. So that made a big difference in my life. Okay, so now that we've covered the basics for code and why it's interesting, if you decide that this is the right path for you and you want to pursue it further, then the natural next step is to think about internships that maybe you can get at a tech company. So let's think about all the different stages for getting this internship. So the first step is writing a good resume, where you will showcase the projects and experiences that you have. And if you get selected, the next step is an online coding assessment, where you will get a link that contains 2 to 3 timed coding questions, and you do that at your own time. If you pass that, typically companies will invite you for interview. So there are 2 types of interviews. One is a technical interview, where you meet an interviewer who asks you more coding questions. It can also be a behavioral interview where they assess you on your communication skills, your work style, whether you're good at teamwork, so that they know if you can be a good fit for their company. So let's start with the first step, which is resume. And of course, the most important part to a resume is not the rhetoric, but rather the content. So I'm going to focus on how to actually build your coding skill and your coding experience so that you have projects and experiences to write on your resume. So one important thing to realize is that coding is not something that you can learn by reading or just accepting information, but rather you have to actually roll up your sleeves and do it. So that's the key to becoming better at coding. So on that end, I think class projects are very valuable experiences. You can also look out for hackathon opportunities organized by your school or external organizations. There are a lot of hackathons happening, and I think those would be really good places to learn and grow your coding skill. There are also coding challenges organized by Google, for example. There are a lot of other coding challenges. This is just an example. So if you check out these opportunities when you're learning to code, I think you will eventually build a very rich profile to show off on your resume. So if we can chart a roadmap for the journey from a beginner to a more experienced coder, initially you will definitely need to learn a programming language as well, and actually grasp the theoretical concepts really well so that you have a solid foundation to work off of. So after that, you might start doing toy projects at school or on your own time. So these will typically be solo projects. And after you're comfortable with that, you will start building more real-world projects. And you will probably also do them in a team rather than just by yourself. Because as the projects get larger and more complicated, you'll inevitably need teammates in order to complete it. So hackathons would be a great opportunity to form a team and code something up during a 2 to 3 day duration. And by the end, you will have something to demo and show off. So last but not least, I think a great way to learn is to participate in open source development. So open source is actually not that different from actual professional work as a software engineer, but instead of keeping the code base a secret and a property of the company, the open source community decide to make the code available to anyone, and anyone can contribute. So if you feel like you have enough experience to contribute to an open source project, definitely try that. And if you put that onto your resume, it will be very impressive to a recruiter because they know that you have an experience that can match the level of work and like all the skills that they need for an actual software engineer. So as you start learning to code, you'll at some point find yourself kind of have to choose an area to dive deeper into. So there are actually a lot of different tracks in coding. These are not an exhaustive list, just some common areas that I can think of. So if you do work as a software engineer, what you will mostly be doing is building software infrastructures. And you might also do a lot of web development, whether in front end or back end. So these infrastructures will be used by people every day, and during the process, a lot of data will be generated. So these data will need to be analyzed by someone so that they can derive insight and help the business make their decision in a better way. So a data analyst is the second track that I listed here. So some typical areas that are popular right now are like big data analytics. And also in finance, they have high demand for data analysts. So if you are good at coding, you have a lot of different options in the industries you can join. So the third area that I listed here is robotics. So there are companies that specialize in autonomous vehicle or drone production. So for robotics, they will mostly be focusing on how to get the robot to interact with the surrounding world, how to make them recognize objects. So this is a different emphasis in a different area. The fourth area that I listed here is graphics, which can include game development, animation development, augmented reality, or virtual reality. This is kind of its own area, and if you're interested in the visual aspects of coding, then this might be the area for you. The last one I listed is research, which has opportunities in both the industry and academia. So in industry, there are actually a lot of researcher positions where they work on innovations or patents. In academia, there are also a lot of interdisciplinary research opportunities. So with all of these different areas, how do you find which one is for you? I think the best way is to try it out, get some experience. So after you complete a project in one area, you'll probably know if you're good at doing that kind of work or whether this is attractive to you. So I think definitely try stuff out and you will know. One very good opportunity on that end is the Cambridge Startup Tech Camp organized by the Cambridge Center for International Research. So as I've emphasized before, project-based learning is really the most effective in the coding area, and this tech camp offers exactly that. It's a 10-week project-based coding camp, And during the process, you will build at least 5 major projects. It will also expose you to a lot of different disciplines so that you can see which one fits your interest the best. So some projects are in the area of fintech, which is the intersection of finance and technology. There are also projects in biotech, natural language processing, computer vision, data science. So after you're exposed to these different disciplines, you'll have a better idea of how to choose your path. There will also be a lot of workshops hosted by startup CEOs for you to gain some real-world first-hand experience of what it's like to be an entrepreneur and innovating with tech. So the highlighting feature of this tech camp, which I think is really helpful for students, is that all of the coding projects are real-world, has industry support, and they are designed and taught by Cambridge instructors who are either PhD candidates or graduates with a lot of industry experience. At the same time, you will also have a lot of exposure to what a tech startup is like and how it works, how to turn an idea into a product. So I think this is an excellent opportunity to grow your coding skill and kind of start your journey in tech if you're interested. So be sure to check out the link listed here to get more details. Okay, so now that we've covered ways to build your coding skills and enrich your resume, we should have plenty of things that we can put on our resume. Next, let's think about how to actually write it, like how to make it effective. One thing that we need to realize is that recruiters and HRs don't really have a lot of time to read through all the details. Because there are a large volume of applications every year, when they're flooded with resumes, they typically only have 15 seconds to take a glance at your resume, see if you're a good fit, which means that we really need to grab their attention. So to stand out, your resume needs to be specific and quantified. Make sure all of your bullet points start with action verbs like developed, designed, implemented, that kind of verbs. And also a very nice way to make you stand out is to quantify what you did and the impact it had. So this helps a lot with making things more specific. Next, let's see some examples of what I mean by that. So on the left, we have a resume entry that is quite generic. So this person said, I worked on a public transit app and built the backend API. So there's not a lot of detail in here, and it's hard to know if this person did a really great job building this app or whether it's just so-so. Whereas in contrast on the right, we have the same job being described, but in a much better way. First, this person started with an action verb, created. So this person said, created a backend transit API that displays real-time departure times for New York City public transit systems. So this offers a lot more details without being too wordy. And at the end, this person said over 10,000 downloads in the first 6 months, which is a quantification of the impact so that the recruiter can know for sure that this person did a good job and they actually made something happen that is useful for a lot of people. Now that we've covered all the basics for resume, let's think about the next steps, which are coding assessment and interview. So how do you prepare for these? The first thing to learn is that these assessments and interviews, they really emphasize on data structure and algorithms. So there are actually courses in every computer science department on these topics. These are kind of the core curriculum. So make sure you really learn those courses well, because they will come in handy when you do an interview or prepare for the coding assessment. And when you're answering the coding question, you can use whatever language you're most confident and comfortable with. And in order to get good at these assessments, the key is to practice. And there are a lot of example questions on a platform called LeetCode, which is basically used by everyone. And make sure that before you go to your interview or do your coding assessment, that you at least familiarize yourself with the questions on LeetCode and get a lot of practice is very, very helpful. During the interview, you should be prepared to talk about projects on your resume. So anything you put on your resume is fair game, and the interviewer might ask about it. So make sure that you don't forget the details about your project, so you make some preparation beforehand. Last but not least, I would like to talk about the application timeline in the tech industry. So usually, if you're a student at a university, fall recruitment is a time where most activity is happening. So it starts in September, and typically campus career fairs would happen by that time. So that is an excellent opportunity to meet employers and actually know what are the opportunities and how you can apply. Also, this is a time when big companies start to accept applications. And it's really important to apply early because most companies have a fixed headcount. So it's basically a rolling application, unlike a typical college application, which ends at a date, and then they review all the applicants. So if you apply later than you should, then probably that company has already filled all of the spaces available. So even if you are a perfect candidate, because you didn't apply early, then kind of you don't get the opportunity. So kind of mark the date of your campus career fair and all the application open dates, which means you should probably start thinking about preparing your resume during the summer so that you can be as prepared as possible for the fall recruitment season. So there is actually another way. So during the spring, there will be another wave of recruiting. So it kind of starts in January and February, and typically like smaller companies will still be hiring. Yeah, the key is to apply early, as I've mentioned before. So this is something to keep at the back of your mind because I think you guys are still going through college applications. So there's no need to stress about internship applications until later. This is just kind of for your information so that you kind of by when the time comes to apply for internships, you will know kind of how it works. As for resources on job search, the career service on your campus will be very helpful. They can help you improve your resume. They can help you with all the internship opportunities that they know of. You should also definitely attend the campus career fair. There's also, in the tech industry, another career fair that's quite famous, which is the Grace Hopper Conference. It's designed for women engineers to find opportunities. So be sure to check out the Grace Hopper Conference. I highly recommend it. And also, when you're doing job search, you should think about getting some referrals from people who are already working in the company. It can be alumni of your school or your acquaintance. So if you get the referral from someone you know, you're more likely to get an interview because they know the company, they know the HR, and they will probably recommend you to them, and it will help your application at least get the attention it deserves from the HR. And also, if you're searching for internships and jobs, job boards like Google Jobs or other platforms are also very helpful. You can definitely sign up for alerts so that you know all of the latest opportunities that are popping up. Yeah, so I think that's all from me. And if you're interested in the tech camp I mentioned before, which is an excellent opportunity, be sure to check out the link here.
Thank you so much, Chris. So we'll now open up the floor for some questions. I'll first read some of the questions that have already been posted in the Q&A.
Yeah.
So Chris, Thomas wants to know what the starting salary for a job like an entry-level software engineer at Amazon is like?
So it's like typically about $100,000 a year, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Anushka asked, when would you recommend a complete beginner to start coding, and which language?
So I think for a complete beginner, Java would be a good entry point. I kind of started with Python, and I think that's good too. So I would say Java or Python because both are popular, but Java is more structured because there are more restrictions on like the type of the variable. So I think Java would be like good for getting you disciplined in coding and not like having your code all over the place simply because Java is so strict. Yeah, but I think it kind of depends on your track because if you are interested in data related coding parts, then Python is definitely the mainstream. So it kind of depends on your area, and I think either Java or Python would be good.
Sivat asked, what kinds of projects did you start with and on which platform? I assume maybe they mean language, or I'm not sure what platform is referring to.
Yeah, so I can remember that the first project that kind of made myself proud is a hackathon project that I did after learning CS for a year. So in that project, I built kind of a mini game where we have a lot of planets in the solar system, and I used like the formula from Newtonian gravitation to kind of restrict where the planets could go. So it's kind of a very realistic simulation of how forces affect the orbit of the planets. And also I put in like spaceships that you can like propel or like put brakes on. So that was a Java project that I did with a graphics user interface, and it's just like a game. And it's really cool to see something like that actually working, and it's also fun. So that's one of the projects that I did.
Okay, so let me answer the question that Thomas asked about the CCR Tech Camp. Thomas asked, how does it differ from other coding camps, and what is the tuition? So I think the main difference between this and other boot camps is the entrepreneurship emphasis that it has. So the whole coding camp is geared towards getting you prepped and ready and geared up for a future career in tech. And whether that's a software engineering job at Amazon or at Google, or starting your own startup, you're going to need skills not just in computer science, but also in leadership and entrepreneurship. And within the domain of coding skills, you're also going to need specific ones, like practically applicable skills that are useful within the industry. So the way the program has been designed is that you're working with other students, much like in an industry setting. You're doing projects, and you're building up your computer science skills. Meanwhile, you're interacting with startup founders, you're learning about leadership and entrepreneurship, and this way you're building a holistic sort of personal and skill profile that will propel you in your career moving forward. So the tuition for this program is, let me just double check. We have see, the tuition is $1,450 for full, and £1,200 for early admissions. The application deadlines are May 14th for early bird and May 25th for regular admissions. And the program is set to start on June 5th. Priyanka actually asked Chris for your LinkedIn, but I assume you can be found on LinkedIn just under your name. Yeah. So Priyanka could maybe reach out directly to you through there. Pawan asked, is it possible for you to share a sample profile with us? So I might need a little more information on that question, Pawan. I'm not exactly clear what you're asking there. Anjali has raised your hand. Anjali, would you like to jump in? Okay. So maybe I can say a little bit more about the tech camp. What we've done there is we've collaborated with CCR has collaborated with 6 startups that were all sort of based out of either Oxford and Cambridge. We reached out through our network because CCR has been founded by Cambridge alumni, including myself. And we reached out through the alumni network to find startups that were willing to work with us and willing to share their experience and insights and input into the coding camp. So this coding camp really is something that's been designed by insiders in the industry and who really understand what sorts of skills you need for the tech industry specifically. So Anjali, what exactly are you able to speak, or you could also just post in the chat if you would like to.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to say that some of the programs that the students have done have been fantastic. So I was just sort of, going to say that, but I think I'm waiting for you all to finish and then I'll give a closing statement. That's okay. I'm just going to leave the stage. So.
Yeah, fantastic. So if you have any more questions about the tech camp, about internships, or even about our other programs, such as the Future Scholar and the One-on-One, you're more than welcome to come to the CCR booth. Otherwise, you can also visit our website at www.cambridge-research.org. So thank you guys, and thank you so much, Chris, for joining us.
Sorry, Oliver. I think I'm seeing one more question in the chat, which asks, is there any age criteria and prior coding knowledge requirement for the camp?
The camp is targeted at high school students, and there is no prior coding knowledge requirement. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. Excellent. So thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. This was a super helpful and informative presentation that you give, and thank you everyone else for joining us. All right.
Bye.
Bye now.